Hello, I'm Adam.
I'm Adrian.
Welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we're talking about The Visitor, which is a pretty generic title for a movie. If you look up The Visitor, I think a movie came out last year called The Visitor. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 1979.
Yes, 1979's The Visitor. It's billed as a science fiction horror movie. And I did feel horror while watching it.
Okay.
But it wasn't. It wasn't because the horror was good.
Yeah, it was. Well, can I read
What were
you?
you gonna say?
Can I read you the description of this movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
An ancient intergalactic warrior arrives on Earth to put a stop to a demonic child's plot to reproduce Satan's next generation of evil. That sounds pretty epic.
It does. And as a result, it was on my list for a very long time.
Where'd you even
But
hear
that
about
is
this
not-
movie?
I saw it. I had gotten some buzz from some people that I followed on Letterboxd. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, an interesting Italian movie. Italians have made some really interesting stuff. Especially, 60s, 70s. Italian cinema was going hard. So I was like, let's watch this. Let's see what this is. I've also just been very interested in 70s and 80s science fiction and fantasy recently. I've been watching a lot of it, reading a lot of it. And so, just all of those things made me think, oh, why not put this on my list? And I will say, they had me for a second. The opening of this movie is, well, in my opinion, it was just the right amount of corny and mystical and intriguing that I was like, okay, I'm buckled in. Let's go for a ride. And in my view, actually, this movie does have some really interesting and strong moments. And when I say it's a strong moment, I don't mean it's because the movie is doing anything really fantastic or engrossing. I mean, it's weird and enjoyable because it's weird. But it's just not weird enough to justify the runtime or the characters or anything. Also, this movie's not long. It's like 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's hour 42, I think.
It's too long. It's just too long.
Yeah, this movie, I just watched it. It felt like I've spent the last 7 years watching this movie.
Yeah, it really did.
Such a slog. Oh my god.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that there's actually some really famous people in this movie. Like John Huston is in this movie. Shelley Winters is in this movie. Glenn Ford is in this movie. Bishop? Lance Henriksen?
Yeah, Lance Henriksen's the one I knew.
He's in this movie. But, man, it just doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. And it sounds interesting. And the setup I thought was interesting, but I don't know.
So
We can talk through it
I
a little
agree
bit.
with you. The opening was enticing for me. It was this weird prophetic dream sequence this old man has, and like what I imagine would be like cover art from the 70s of like Dune or something, like really cool, really pulpy. I was getting into it. And then he wakes up and he tells a room full of bald children and like what can only be described as like white space Jesus, that the next incarnation of Satine has appeared on Earth, and that's basically the Antichrist. And to sum up this movie is L. Ron Hubbard's The Omen.
Yeah.
And
It really is.
And I'll say it, this was the worst movie I've seen this year.
Whoa.
This movie blew. This movie sucks. For a movie.
Craziest thing I've heard.
Yeah, it's the worst. For a movie described so epically, like not a thing happens in this movie. It's so boring. Very few deaths even happen. Like no stakes. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
It feels so long because of that. The cinematography's bad. The music is ridiculously unfitting. And mostly it's just boring. It's just a boring
the music
movie.
is hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, before we even get into it, well, okay, there's actually two things I really want to talk about in this movie, and one of them, the basketball game sequence.
Yes.
I imagine we can get into that.
It happens right at the beginning, so.
Yeah, it's early on in the film, but yeah, the score of this movie is by Franco Michalizzi. I don't know if that's how you say his name. So, actually, a very prolific Italian composer. And he did a few spaghetti westerns early on. But honestly, I don't know. This movie sounds like it was composed by someone really inexperienced. And I have no idea what they were going for. But whatever. It's like very Japanese Spider-Man. You know that show? The Japanese Spider-Man show?
Oh, yeah.
It's like that. It's a lot of like high intensity, late 70s beats.
Yeah.
And none of it works with any of the stuff that's happening in the film. They've got this old-ass man running across, chasing a young girl, but his running is like very slow.
He's power walking.
And they're playing this like beat cop theme.
Yeah, it's A-Team adjacent.
Yeah, A-Team adjacent. That's a great way of describing it. Just so odd.
It's so weird. Yeah, it's like any of the scary scenes where like the forces of good are fighting the forces of evil. You know, it's supposed to be a horror movie, and then cue the A-Team music. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. So this guy also composed for Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I thought maybe he had composed the famous theme, but he didn't. He composed a different theme within Curb Your Enthusiasm, so he doesn't even have that under his belt.
Yeah. I also recognize Shelley Winters, who plays, I think, the nanny. And those are the only two people I recognize, Lance Henriksen and Shelley Winters. Lance Henriksen is in like a bunch of horror movies, a lot of B-horror movies. He's in Pumpkinhead, he's in Aliens. Shelley Winters is the mom in Lolita.
Yeah.
And How the Mighty Have Fallen, because I'm sorry to see her in this movie.
Yeah, it's not very good. Yeah, she was in Diary of Anne Frank too, and won an Oscar for that.
She won an Oscar. She was in a Kubrick film, and then she was in
That's
this.
crazy.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, a couple things. First, you said it was an Italian film, and it has a lot of Italian people behind the camera, but it's distributed by American International Pictures and is in English. These are English-speaking actors, so it's not like we watched a movie with Italian subtitles. So in a way, it's...
Well, no, but wasn't it produced in Italy?
I think it was, but it's still, you know, it takes place in America. It's supposed to be...
How odd.
It's not like we're watching an Italian movie, is what I'm saying. We didn't find an avant-garde foreign film.
It's Italian in that it's Italian and it's in the sense that spaghetti westerns were.
Yeah, it's Italian like a cheap movie is Italian.
Like they tried to do it for less money.
Yeah, the budget in this movie's defense was only $800,000. And they spent all of that money on birds, didn't they?
They did. So many birds. So many birds. The epic pigeon finale.
Yeah, epic pigeon finale.
Okay. You describe that opening. We meet Space Jesus, who is very, very silent. He doesn't say anything. He's got all these bald kids around him. And basically, Satine has escaped to Earth and was killed by this figure named Yahweh.
It was very like Yahweh and Satine instead of Yahweh and Satan.
But it's like just use the
You
word.
can't change one letter and be like it's different.
Right. That's my point. Like it was just so funny to hear them try to make these names different, but also do it in the most lazy fashion they could. But anyway, they say that this Satine's spirit lives on. And that's why we're seeing all these children that are coming and trying to take over. And they've got a new one, and her name is Katie. And we have a movie, basically. But we don't.
It's very Scientology. Like,
yes, it is.
This devil came from space, and actually his progeny are the Antichrist. And it's just, yeah, it's L. Ron Hubbard's The Omen.
It really is. No, that's a great way of describing it. You can see the influences of this film. The Omen, of course, Rosemary's Baby. It's really obvious, but it has none of the grit or just goodness of those movies.
Or events taking place.
Right. Things happening.
Or things happening, yeah.
So we meet one of the main characters. His name is Raymond in the very beginning of the movie, just after that odd cold open where we see all the bald kids. And there's this professional basketball game going on. We find out through a courtside interview that Raymond is actually the owner of the team. And immediately I was like, uh-oh, we're going downhill with this sequence. Because though Raymond, I think, is played just fine by Lance Henriksen, this interview of this invasive courtside interviewer asking crazy questions. Where are you going to get the money for that? What do you mean? What do you mean you're going to put it all on the line for the team? How are you going to do that? Where are you going to get the money? He's like pressing the coach. He works for the team that the coach owns, or excuse me, the team owner owns. And just very odd and really took me out of it because this doesn't happen. And it felt like a spoof of something. I don't know. And not to mention, we see what I would say was 15-minute segment of a basketball game. And it probably wasn't 15 minutes, but God, did it feel so long. We're watching these guys play basketball. And this isn't a basketball movie. It was very, very odd. And to make matters worse, we're also watching people watch the guys play basketball. It's like nothing happening for 10 minutes on screen.
It's completely inconsequential to anything, also. It's 10 minutes of nothing. And there's a lot of that in this movie, where they go and do something that has nothing to do with anything. It is pointless. At the end of the sequence, though, we're introduced to Katie, who is our Antichrist figure. As the final slam dunk happens, the ball pops, and I think they kind of imply that she did it with her psychokinetic powers. She comes in and she's dressed in this, like, what I described as something Megan would wear, but with a lime green trench coat.
Yeah.
So she's fashionable.
A lot of choice outfits in this movie. Gosh, her sunglasses.
The giant square ones?
Yeah, and it's insane, and it's odd. Yeah, she pops the ball with her magic brain powers, and we are led to believe from a silent exchange. I do enjoy that it was show, don't tell. We've got Raymond is evil, and we see the kid kind of pushing things toward his favor. And, you know, we're immediately led to believe there's something going on. That paired with the really ominous, poorly done courtside interview where it's so on the nose, it's painful. Because I guess you're supposed to get the sense that Raymond has all this unknown, untracked wealth, and they don't know how he got it. But again, learning that through a courtside interview at the beginning of the movie is very ham-fisted and very odd. You would think there's 1,000 other ways to do that that are more interesting and more impactful. Like you said, this whole sequence is so inconsequential.
I mean, but most of this movie is inconsequential.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Katie, for the vast majority of this movie, doesn't do anything. It's like, is she evil? She's not doing anything at all. Like, she's just kind of, like, indifferent when bad things happen, and, like, that's the worst she does. By the end of the movie, she starts being more straight-up malicious. But for a long time, she doesn't do anything. The only thing she does, and you can't blame her, I don't think, is early on in the movie. It's her birthday, and she's opening her presents at a birthday party, and she opens a little box. And in it is a gun. And I don't know why there's a gun in there, but she goes, "Wow, Mommy," and she runs into the other room with it and just throws it onto a table, and it hits the table and fires, shooting her mother in the back, severing her spine, and paralyzing her from the waist down for the rest of the movie. And can you even, like, blame her for that? Like, someone gave her a loaded gun with the safety off as a birthday present.
And what comes of it? Do they find out?
And what comes of it? Who gave her the gun? I don't think they ever say.
They don't. And they
so
have one 30-second sequence that made me laugh out loud. A 30-second sequence of a cop, like, putting the gun in an evidence bag and being like, "Oh, this was a doozy," and crickets, lights out. We never see anybody else investigating it.
Who gave her the gun? Yeah, we never get an answer to that. And that's like, there's literally a smoking gun that never gets addressed again.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like, yeah, awesome storytelling. So that's like right off the bat, and it's just downhill from there.
I should note.
Yeah.
I think I know you hated this movie, and you've already said it's the worst you've seen this year. It's certainly bottom 10 for me. I wouldn't say it's the worst I've seen this year because funny enough, I watched The Visit, M. Night Shyamalan. That's the worst movie I've seen.
It can't be worse than this.
Oh,
It at least
check
was
it
more
out.
entertaining than this.
I don't think so. Well, but that's what I was going to say. This movie at least made me laugh quite a bit. And so that's why I think I was more gracious.
I didn't
to
laugh. I was bored to tears.
I
wept.
laughed. The gun made me laugh. What also made me laugh was the panel of Satanists that Raymond reports to in the movie. And they're like, you have to knock up your girlfriend. She's got the magic womb. Like right after the basketball game. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They're like, you need to knock up Barbara. She needs to give you a son. Her womb is the only one that can produce the body of Satine.
The progeny of Zatine. Yeah, she's a vessel because she has the genes to create Antichrist children, basically. But she's not evil, despite the fact that she has the genes. So
Right.
I guess she just didn't get the evil phenotype that her kids get. I don't know why, but whatever.
This poor lady throughout the whole movie. Her man who she, God, for good reason, won't marry him. And he's like, come on, why don't you marry me? This is right after the game. There's a sequence where they're cupcaking and they're like talking. And he's like, you never talk to me. I want to get married. And I guess you kind of feel bad for him in that moment. And not 10 minutes later, they cut to him with the panel of Satanists saying, you got to get her to marry you so you can knock her up. And it's like, oh, okay, there's no stakes anymore. Could you have imagined if this movie had him be that mysterious figure right throughout, consistently, and they have him struggle to get her to marry him, and for some reason she's just not into it, and there's something weird going on with him, there's something weird going on with the daughter, and then later on, after we've grown some attachment to this character, we find out that he had malicious intent and was reporting his entire relationship to a panel of Satanists. Wouldn't that be infinitely more interesting? Wouldn't the build serve the film?
Any
But no,
choice
we don't get that.
would have been more interesting.
It's immediately spoiled. I mean, we immediately know this guy's a weirdo.
Yeah, and also the panel of Satanists, it's like just shadowy figures on a board. We don't ever learn, like, are they senators? They're rich, I guess. We don't know why, though. We don't know if they're CEOs. They're just well-dressed and in a room that is fancy.
Right.
That is as specific as it gets.
I guess I don't know, they want you to think these are rich and powerful men, but
And then, like, maybe they are the ones that gave this gun to this child, but, like, why? They want the child to live, and they want her mother to live. Why throw a gun, literally throw a gun at them?
that's my thing, too.
What did that accomplish? What did that accomplish?
What was the point of the gun? They want Barbara to have another child, so you risk killing her?
There's no explanation.
Yeah. No, there isn't. There isn't.
There's also, Katie has a pet kestrel, and it is sometimes evil also. Like, it attacks people for her. I don't know why. There's one scene later on where it attacks her mother, but it's... I don't know if you noticed this. It's not a kestrel anymore. They replaced it with a hawk.
Yes.
And it suddenly is a hawk, and, like, a hawk is way bigger than a kestrel. Like, it's notably a different bird. And, like, why? Why did they switch birds?
I don't know. I noticed it too and was really confused. My thought process was maybe it's transforming.
I don't know. They worked that kestrel to death is why. And they couldn't pay it any more overtime on this measly budget.
They might have. But yeah, that gun thing really didn't make any sense. It was really nonsensical.
My brother described this movie as, like, they filmed a bunch of stuff and then tried to make a plot out of it. Like, they filmed it and then wrote the script. There's even a few times where, like, you can tell they've dubbed over themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And it's bad. Yeah. And, like, why?
No, this did have some of the worst dubbing I've ever seen. There's a sequence in which Barbara is, I mean, I guess there's no real sense in being too specific, but basically, Raymond does eventually get Barbara pregnant. It works, I guess, but she knows something is up because he's a freaking weirdo, and her daughter shot her in the spine and is also a weirdo and has this, like, bird that just flies around the house and attacks people. So, rightfully, she has reservations about having his child. And she goes and meets Katie's biological father secretly at his practice because he's a doctor. I think his name was Sam, right? Dr. Collins. And she asks him in confidence to abort Raymond's child. This child that would be basically Satan incarnate. In that scene where she is talking about getting an abortion, there is dubbing that takes place.
Absolutely.
Where her mouth isn't even moving.
Absolutely horrible.
And there are words being said. Just like awful. And I don't know why in this little tiny room where they were filming, they had to dub over the audio. Like, what happened? Did a mic die? Did a mic not work? Did they forget to plug one in?
Yeah, they're in a small, empty room with 2 people.
Yeah.
There's
no reason why the audio should be bad.
Yeah, I don't know. And then the editing is bad in this movie, too. You know, like, every possible thing is terrible. There's a scene where the cops are investigating into that gun incident, and they're interviewing everybody who was at the birthday party. But the scene comes way after you and the movie have forgotten about the gun. And then after that scene, they forget about the gun again. It feels like they meant to slip it in earlier and forgot and put it in at an inappropriate time. And that scene's also a great example of how absolutely horrible the cinematography is in this movie. They do this awful shot repeatedly where the scene or the shot starts with the back of someone's head, lingers with the whole frame as the back of someone's head for far too long. Then the camera moves to the right or left of that person to reveal some random person at the party who they're interviewing. And they do that 5 or 6 times in this sequence, and it is awful. And they keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's just like tip of the iceberg for the cinematography in this movie. This movie has an extreme excess of extreme close-ups. Like, for no reason, you're going to get like half a person's face. For no reason. This movie is bad. The shadowy board of Satanists have this, like, butler guy that, like, when he leads Lance Henriksen's character into the room with all the shadowy figures, they linger on his face. And it's a really big it's a close-up for, like, way too long. And I was like, okay, well, this character is going to be important. And then, no, he's not important. And then at the end of the movie, they linger on his face again. And, like, who is he? He's unnamed. I don't know why they do this, but sure, they do it. There's just so much stuff like this.
Yeah, the direction and the editing are very weak in this movie.
The direction,
all throughout.
The music, the production.
And it sucks because, again, it wasn't necessarily pretty, but there is that really captivating sequence in the beginning. And so you start to wonder. It's this wide shot of this liminal space with this figure, right? Staring down at another figure, and it looks like this epic battle between good and evil just in a couple of frames. And you really just get nothing quite like that until the end of the movie. They do try to bring back those otherworldly shots, but then at the end of the movie, they ran out of money, and there's some of the worst visual effects, even by 1979 standards, that I've ever seen in my life. Specifically, the birds. When he's like manifesting the birds, and you see like the paper cutouts rather of birds floating around the screen, and it's just very odd and very off-putting and hideous. A lot of birds in this movie. Also, we've mentioned it, but Jesus, there's so many birds.
And like on the nose birds imagery, or what have you. Right. There's
White dove.
I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I'm gonna do that a lot. The editing is so disjointed because there's some instances of footage just straight up being reused. There's scenes of Katie doing gymnastics that they just reuse a couple times. And there's one scene they reuse where it's almost entirely you can't see anything except lights, but it's obviously a runway that suddenly starts to glow, and then you see the old man, who I don't even know if we've mentioned yet, but he's the ancient warrior who's there to stop evil. And that's it. That's the scene. It's just like a glowing runway, and then that's it. And then later on in the movie, there's like some lights on it, and like, I don't know, it's vaguely extraterrestrial, but like, you can't discern meaning out of it.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Thank you for showing us that.
I can't even say that character is worth really going into detail about. He is kind of just tailing. What's he referred to as again?
Kolsowicz, I believe.
Yeah. He got an interesting name, and like you said, he's an ancient warrior type, but he's just really an old man chasing around Katie the entire movie. And you get the sense that he's not intimidated by her at any point. He's done this many times, as we kind of see at the end of the movie, and as they hint in the beginning of the movie. But there's really not much of a character there. And you would think that this ancient mystical warrior would be kind of interesting and maybe one of the more fascinating elements of the movie. But for me, he just felt very half-baked and lame. And in fact, he honestly led me to more laughs than he did anything else. You know, some of the writing around this character is just really awful. An entire sequence where Katie and he are at Katie's mom's house, and they're like talking and playing video game. Yeah, I got the sense that they were shooting for like good versus evil, a battle of wits sort of situation. Because he's telling her, it's inevitable, I'm going to get you. And she's saying, no, you won't. But it just comes off as an old guy talking to a kid. You know, there's no weight to it.
Yeah, they're playing Pong.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I just don't buy these characters. I don't buy Katie. I don't buy any of this.
Yeah, and then later on when they're having like the actual struggle of like, will he defeat her or not? I'm like, man, y'all remember when you were just playing video games earlier? Like, why didn't you do this earlier? Why have you waited so long?
Yeah,
she starts to... Yeah, why is this movie this long? She starts to, like, start killing her mother, too, and, like, that's when he acts, and it's like, why did you wait for her mother to start being killed
and
to
also,
do anything?
Why are they killing her?
Oh, yeah. No motivation. Nothing makes sense in this movie.
You need her womb. Why are you killing her? There is absolutely no motivation for anything surrounding Barbara. My favorite part of this movie is when Jane, Barbara's maid, starts slapping Katie. That's the funniest part of this movie.
It's pretty wild.
It's insane. And I think the funnier part of it is that Katie, who is a little demon who, you know, can explode things with her mind and can make birds pick out people's eyeballs, which she does at one point in the movie, does nothing to her after getting slapped in the face.
Look, she doesn't do much. There's an ice skating scene where, I don't know, she defeats a bunch of boys, basically, not through supernatural means, but simply by being better at ice skating than them. Like, she's just juking them out. Yeah, it's like... And then there's a slow-mo where she jukes one of them out, and then he flies through a window, and it's dramatic, like, this kid's being thrown through a window. But, like, they're just ice skating. Like, no stakes. I don't know.
No, that and why are we watching her play so many sports?
I know, it's because she has powers both supernatural and natural, which means she's good at ice skating and gymnastics.
And video games. She's great at
video
Pong.
games. Yeah,
she's great at Pong. Dumb. Yeah, she's. We get a lengthy gymnastics scene. Okay, we get that weird... It's also completely unmotivated. Nothing comes of it, the ice skating scene. I don't know what's going on here.
Oh, and then the old man watches her do it, and he, like, starts walking down the stairs, and he's watching her do it, and they cue the 18 music again. They cue the freaking 18 music again every time you see this old man.
Yeah, it's like his theme.
Yeah, he is a horror. It's bad. Odd. Yeah, it makes no sense.
How many times have I said it's very odd, this episode? I mean, it just is. This is the head-scratcher, this movie.
I would, if I may...
Yeah.
I would like to read to you some of the movies I've seen this movie that I thought were better than this movie, because this is the worst movie I've seen. And I've seen bad movies. I watched Nikki Deuce, which is Noah Monk, like, with a bunch of Sopranos actors in it, and it's awful. I watched Tom Green's Freddy Got Fingered.
That's a bad movie.
I watched Kangaroo Jack.
No way.
Yes, and all those movies were leagues more entertaining than this one. This movie was worse than those.
The Visit is the worst movie I've seen all year. Dashcam, awful. Wolves at the Door, I don't know if you've ever seen that. Horrid.
But were they better than this movie?
No, I'm telling you, they weren't.
Well,
Wolves at the Door, horrid. Spree? Did you watch that?
I watched Spree.
Joe Keery?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I'd watch Spree again before I watched this again.
Awful. I might agree with you there, but I thought it was a worse movie.
I'll never watch this again. I would rather watch Terrifier 2 back to back again than watch this movie one more time.
That's an easy one. Predators with Adrian Brody, I rated under this movie. And Hagazusa. I don't know if you've seen that.
I'm removing half a star for my rating as we speak.
Wow, I love that.
It's got 1 star for me. Another thing disappointing is like how cool is the poster? All right, there's 2 posters I've seen for this movie. One of them is a giant eyeball with some ghoul hands below it holding a wire and blood dripping off the wire, and it says, "They know we are here." And that's very ominous, very alien, very supernatural. And then nothing in the movie remotely resembles this poster. And then there's another one, I believe, of a raven with an eyeball in its beak. And that makes a little more sense. And it's very, like, kind of artsy, psychedelic looking. But, like, once again, nothing to do. Absolutely the wrong impression of this movie.
No, I think that the posters is the coolest part of this whole movie. They're really, really cool. I was looking at them on Etsy, see if I could find one.
Are you going to buy one?
No, they don't exist. You can't find them.
If you could, would you get one?
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. The posters are cool.
I don't want to be reminded of this movie for the rest of my life.
Oh, stop it.
This movie was horrible.
Okay, I thought it was bad. I clearly didn't like it as little as you did. I think there's some good laughs in this, and I think that it's a very interesting experience. It is really boring, especially at the end. It really becomes a slog. There's this attempt at an epic finale where all these birds come and tear out Katie's hair, and we learn that she ends up like one of the other bald kids who were all attempts at Satine, I guess, taking over or whatever.
And the old man goes, "She thought I was going to kill her, but children are not to be harmed. You only killed the bad parts." And like, what does that mean? What I like to imagine is that he actually did kill her, and then in the Scientology whatever crazy mindset is her soul went into the spaceship that is in the tail of Halley's Comet, and that's where they live.
I love that you've clung to the Scientology thing.
There's really like a Scientology Heaven's Gate aspect to this movie that gets kind of glossed over, except for the beginning and the end of this movie.
Yeah.
And I wish they would have focused on
That's the most interesting part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It's also, I mean, it's done because it's that, but also like, this is the year for it. 79. White Jesus.
That's true.
White space Jesus.
He's even described, if you look up like a plot synopsis of this film, he's even described as a Jesus-like figure. And I don't even think he's credited.
No, he's at, well, let's clarify, not the old man, but this just like guy in the
right,
quote unquote spaceship.
The kids.
Yeah, he looks like white Jesus. He's like got a really unnaturally blonde hair and like really blue eyes that maybe they're natural, but dang. And he wears white and everybody's white and they live in a white room and he's just like extra white Jesus. He's like Aryan race. This is what Hitler thought Jesus looked like.
Oh, here you go. I actually found that guy. His name is Steve Summers, and he's just a talk radio host.
Oh, shout out. And he was in
and he was uncredited. He was uncredited for the film.
Yeah, well, because he doesn't really do anything besides kind of...
Yeah, fair.
He, to be fair, gives you the most plot out of pretty much the whole movie.
Yeah.
In a couple seconds at the beginning. But yeah, this movie for me, I laughed incredulously like 2 times. And then the whole rest of the movie was just mind-numbingly boring. It was just so boring. Like all the other movies I said, I found entertainment. I found laughter. I enjoyed it a little bit. This movie, thoroughly unentertaining. And that's its big... Because I can enjoy a bad movie. You know this. You know I can love a bad movie. But
of course,
none of it's just boring. None of it's horribly boring like this. Cannot recommend this to a single soul.
Fair enough.
Bury it.
I know that this movie has a decent cult following. You know, it was redistributed by Drafthouse Films, which they're based out of Austin.
Yeah, I found that too.
Yeah, very interesting. I think for people that like the kind of psychedelic sci-fi stuff from the late 70s or even, you know, late 60s, this is a movie that you could check out, you know, and I could see people really clinging to this one. But yeah, I got to agree, you know, I think it's got some interesting moments, but on the whole, it's not something I would ever watch again. Yeah,
it's got one interestingly looking corny scene at the beginning and then shut the movie off. Don't go past that.
Well, there you go.
That's for me. Yeah, I despise this movie.
Free on Tubi.
Not free on Tubi, free on Pluto TV, and free on YouTube, which is where I watched it.
Oh, well, that's all you should pay for it.
You should, if someone really wants to watch this with you, you should have them pay you $5, like at least, because it's not worth free. The price of free is too high. Because the real cost of this movie is an hour and like 40 something minutes that you'll never get back.
That is the real crime. Is that it's really not a long movie, but God, does it feel long?
Me and my brother were going to have a movie marathon because he had a bunch that he checked out from the library, and we were going to see that. And we finished this movie, and he was like, I can't watch another movie. It killed the movie marathon in its cradle.
Wow.
So
there you have it.
Yeah, that's this movie. I've said more than this movie deserves to be spoken about.
Fair enough, yeah.
If you have any thoughts.
I'm good.
Okay.
No. Tell your brother I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for watching this movie. Well, thank you for talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm cursing you slightly for saying we should watch this movie, though.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm going to drink heavily after this. It was not my initial intent, but now it has to be.
So. You have to.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me, Adrian, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.